I took the blame and went to prison for my first love's white moonlight, in exchange for his promise to save my brother's life. 3 years later, on the day I was released from prison, he was holding a grand engagement banquet for his white moonlight, while my brother's tombstone had already stood for 2 years. I barged into the banquet in prison garb. As he watched with disgust while security dragged me out, I asked him 2 questions with a lighthearted tone. Ethan, wanna hear that recording again? The one from 3 years ago when you begged me on your knees to take the fall? Oh, and about that 10-year engagement in Grandma's will? Only 3 months left. How do you plan to explain this to your new fiancée? It's been 3 years, Ethan, I'm out of prison. My voice was not loud, yet it pierced the clamor of the engagement banquet like a sharp blade. With a bang, the champagne tower shattered, leaving debris scattered everywhere. The entire venue fell into dead silence. On the stage, Ethan, who was putting a diamond ring on Anne, froze in his actions, his handsome face instantly cracking. Beside him, Anne, wearing the gown I designed, looked at me in horror, as if seeing a demon crawling back from hell. She was right. 3 years ago, the lawyer Summer had died. The one who survived was prisoner 734. Security. Throw this lunatic out. Ethan's mother was the first to react, her face full of disgust. 2 security guards roughly grabbed me. In the moment of being dragged, I fiercely struggled, and the back of my prison uniform tore with a rip. Gasps echoed one after another. From my left shoulder to my right waist, a hideous scar like a centipede coiled over my gaunt butterfly bones. That was the metal prison had left me. I had once endured excruciating pain to survive, relying on the promise to my brother. I told myself, Summer, you're going to prison to exchange for his life. I laughed, my voice hoarse, staring fixedly at Ethan. You promised to take care of my brother. What about the 3 million surgery fee you pledged? Word by word, my voice penetrated the entire venue. But his tombstone has stood for 2 years. He was only 19 when he died. Ethan, is my brother's life only worthy of paving a red carpet to happiness for the woman you love? The crowd erupted in uproar. You're talking nonsense. Anne's face turned pale, clutching Ethan's arm and trembling. Ethan finally walked toward me, his tall figure enveloping me, lowering his voice and warning, Summer, don't go crazy here, let's talk privately. Talk? I looked up at him, my smile icy cold. Fine. I want my brother back to life, can you give that? His face turned ashen. You know that's impossible. Yes, impossible. My smile suddenly vanished. Just like it's impossible for you to admit that Anne was the one driving 3 years ago. You traded my freedom and future for your peace of mind. Shut up. He roared uncontrollably, gripping my wrist. And ran over crying, Sister Summer, we'll compensate you. Compensate? I shook off Ethan, pulled out an old phone from my pocket, and pressed play. A man's pleading voice with sobs clearly echoed through the entire banquet hall. Summer, I beg you. And can't have any trouble. Help her this once. Your brother's surgery fee, 3 million. I guarantee it. Summer, our years of relationship. In the recording, it was the only time Ethan was humble in my memory. It was also the last time I believed him. The entire hall fell into dead silence. Ethan's face turned from ashen to deathly pale. I calmly turned off the recording and pocketed the phone. Ethan, I looked at him, and also at the so-called upper-class people behind him. Now, can we have a proper talk? Name your price. In the study, Ethan's father Charles assumed an arrogant posture. How much money will it take for you to destroy the recording and disappear forever? In his eyes, human lives and justice could all be priced. I laughed. Charles, how much is my brother's life worth? Shin's mother Lydia snorted coldly. Summer, back then you agreed to take the blame yourself. I agreed? I laughed even colder. Have you forgotten who knelt at my doorstep, swearing to take care of my brother? Lydia's face turned pale. Enough. Ethan slammed the table fiercely, his eyes bloodshot. Summer, what exactly do you want? I met his gaze, saying word by word, first, let Anne go to prison. Second, make you, Ethan, pay for your betrayal. Third, make your entire Shin family publicly apologize for my brother's death. You're dreaming. Anne screamed, hiding behind Ethan. Ethan subconsciously protected her, that gesture like a dull knife stabbing into my heart again. He looked at me and actually said, and is innocent. She drove drunk, caused an accident, found someone to take the blame, and caused a death, she's innocent? I interrupted him, finding it utterly absurd. Ethan, what about your law and morals? It seems there's no room for discussion. Charles's patience was exhausted, a ruthless glint flashing in his eyes. A mere recording can't bring down the Shin family. He picked up his phone, preparing to call someone. Is that so? Not only was I not afraid, but I laughed. Charles, you've probably forgotten another matter. I leisurely pulled out a yellowed paper from my pocket and unfolded it on the table. It was a copy of a prenuptial agreement. Ethan's pupils contracted sharply. When Charles saw the clauses clearly, his face changed abruptly. It seems Charles hasn't gone senile yet. I pointed to the clause circled in red pen and read it out. The eldest grandson Ethan must maintain a legal marital relationship with Miss Summer until the 10th anniversary of my death. If either party initiates divorce or if the marriage breaks due to the fault of one party, they automatically forfeit the inheritance rights to 50% of the Shin Group shares. I paused, my gaze sweeping over every ashen-faced person present. Grandma's death hasn't reached 10 years yet. Our marriage agreement has only 3 months left. The entire study fell into dead silence. And looked at Ethan in disbelief. Brother Ethan, is this true? Ethan closed his eyes, and when he opened them, only endless regret remained. This isn't a threat, it's a reminder. I put away the agreement, regaining full control. A reminder to everyone that in the next 3 months, I, Summer, am still the rightful young madam of the Shin family. So, first, I extended one finger. Announce publicly that tonight's engagement banquet was a misunderstanding. Second, I extended a second finger, my gaze landing on Anne's pale face. Make her get out of this house. Third, I looked at Ethan. Starting tomorrow, I will enter the group as the future heir of Shin Group and audit all accounts. After all, half of it is mine. Don't even think about it. And screamed in breakdown. Fine. 2 words squeezed out from Ethan's gritted teeth. He stared fixedly at me. Summer, the game has just begun, don't play with fire and burn yourself. Don't worry, I gave him an impeccable smile. I've crawled out of hell, I'm long accustomed to the temperature of fire. I turned to Anne, my smile icy cold. You have 10 minutes to take your things and disappear from my house. I moved back into the Shin family mansion and into the wedding room that was mine and Ethan's. The air was filled with Anne's cloyingly sweet perfume scent. She had lived here for 3 years, sleeping in my bed, using my dressing table, enjoying everything that should have been mine. Meanwhile, I had been in a damp cell, accompanied by rats and cockroaches. Throw out everything that carries her scent. I coldly ordered the servants. Ethan stood at the door, his face gloomy. Do you have to do this? Ethan, I didn't even turn my head. Are you referring to me cleaning up trash or exercising the rights of the mistress? He snorted coldly in frustration and slammed the door as he left. I knew he went to comfort his white moonlight who had suffered such a great injustice. Fine, I needed quiet anyway. In the dead of night, I sat alone on the cold floor. My taut nerves finally relaxed, and delayed sorrow engulfed me. I thought of my brother, Alan. He suffered from a rare osteogenesis imperfecta, a porcelain doll. Our parents passed away early, and I desperately became a lawyer just to scrape together the $3 million for his surgery. In my most desperate moment, Ethan gave me hope. I take the blame for Anne, and he pays to save my brother's life. I believed him, even grateful before entering prison. Thinking back now, it's a tremendous irony. I pulled out the note with the cemetery address. The neighbor aunt's words tortured my heart like knives. That child was only 19 when he passed, couldn't even afford a decent urn. IOLN. So, Ethan, and the Shin family, all of you must use what you cherish most to accompany my Ellen in burial. Early the next morning, I put on my only remaining black suit skirt. 3 years had made it look oversized, but on me, it was like donning armor anew. The woman in the mirror had sharp eyes. Lawyer Summer was back. Downstairs, Ethan was calmly reading the newspaper. Going to the company? His tone was indifferent. Of course. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down. From today, I am Shin Group's intern. He frowned. What do you mean? I can't just parachute in as the boss lady right after getting out of prison. That would make it even harder for you to save face, Ethan. I leisurely sipped my milk. I want to remind you at every moment that you married a wife with a criminal record. You have to keep this black hat firmly on for me. His face turned ashen, finally squeezing out 2 words through his teeth, as you wish. Wait. I called to him as he stood up, pushing a document in front of him. This is the internal notice and confidentiality agreement I drafted. Please sign, Ethan. I like to do everything by the rules. When he saw the position I arranged for myself as chairman's special assistant, internship period, his gaze turned sinister. Summer, what trick are you playing? Playing? I smiled. Ethan, I'm just seriously taking back what belongs to me. After all, with this fortune of hundreds of billions, I have to learn how to manage it, so that in 3 months. I won't be schemed out of everything by certain people, right? He understood my meaning, sneered, signed his name flamboyantly, and threw the document back to me. Good, very good. I'd like to see how much skill a former lawyer who sat in prison for 3 years has left. I looked at his signature, the smile on my lips widening. Ethan, the game has begun. In these 3 years in prison, besides counting brick seams, what I did most was replay all cases in my mind over and over, memorizing all legal clauses. I didn't waste my profession. It will be my sharpest knife for revenge. The next day, bearing the title of Chairman's Special Assistant, I stood in his office. A thick document was slammed on my desk. New Bay Cultural Tourism City Project. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze contemptuous. The company's most important project is now handed to you. Lawyer Summer, let me see how much skill you have left after these 3 years. Ethan's first move was faster than I imagined. I opened the file. New Bay, City A's largest landmark project, a hot potato. He handed the project to me with malicious intent, a pit already dug, waiting for me to jump in and take the blame. Thank you for your trust, Ethan. I closed the file, my face showing no ripples. He wanted to see me panic, but I was unusually calm. In the following days, I locked myself in the office, immersing myself in the project materials. Everyone was waiting to watch the show, to see how the sinful boss lady would be pushed into the abyss by her husband himself. Soon, in the corner of the geological report, I found a line of deliberately downplayed data, hexavalent chromium severely exceeding standards. Once exposed, the project would halt, and Shin Group would face astronomical compensation and reputational collapse. I didn't make a fuss. Instead, I began to seriously advance the work. At night, I used my access to log into the company database and review the financial records of the past 3 years. Amid the vast accounts, I found clues, several huge sums, through shell companies, ultimately flowing to the Su Group. Ethan, you're using Shin family's money to fill Su family's holes. The corners of my mouth curled into a cold smile. At the Monday executive meeting, Ethan publicly elevated me, claiming all credit for New Bay belonged to me. I stood up, calmly accepting this poisoned praise. Anne's visits to the company became more frequent. That afternoon, she pushed the door open and immediately saw the phased report on my desk. Oh, progress so quickly? She picked up the report, her tone sour. It was a report I deliberately forged, and at the end, I bolded a line, some core technologies can seek support from Su Group. I knew she was tempted. She wanted too much to prove herself in front of her father. Sure enough, when I left, she quickly stuffed the report into her bag. From the corridor corner, I saw her sneaky actions clearly. When she walked toward the elevator, I suddenly appeared, blocking her path. Miss, and, in such a hurry to go where? I crossed my arms looking at her, finished looking at the things on my desk. Her face turned pale, clutching her bag tightly. You're talking nonsense. I didn't take anything. Is that so? I approached her. Then what's in your bag? Why not open it and let everyone see why Shin's core secrets are in your bag? The argument attracted employees. And completely panicked, trying to push me away, but I grabbed her bag. Give it back. She screamed and grabbed for it. We struggled, and files scattered from the bag onto the ground. And looked at the reports scattered on the ground and completely lost her reason. She screamed and pushed toward me fiercely. But due to excessive force, her high heel twisted, and her body instantly lost balance. Ah! With a scream, she tumbled down the stairs, hit the wall, and fainted on the spot. I stood at the stairwell, looking indifferently. The miniature camera on me recorded the entire process from her stealing to her own misstep. Soon, Ethan arrived upon hearing the news. He pushed through the crowd and picked up Anne from the ground. She woke up just then. Upon seeing him, Anne's tears burst forth, trembling as she pointed at me. Using all her strength, she screamed, "It was her. Ethan." Summer pushed me. "She wants to kill me." Ethan looked up, rage surging in his eyes, staring fixedly at me, his voice ice cold. "Summer, why did you lay hands on Anne?" In front of everyone, once again, he convicted me without asking questions. Facing his murderous gaze, I slowly curled my lips into a cold smile. "Ethan," I shook the phone in my hand, "the surveillance will speak." After saying that, I put away the phone and turned to leave under the crowd's uncertain gazes. As soon as I exited Shin's gate, Lydia's car blocked my way. She rushed out of the car, followed by the family doctor, pointing at my nose and shrieking. "Summer! You lunatic from prison! Just out and already trying to kill someone." Her voice was high and sharp, instantly attracting the attention of all off-duty employees. Ethan soon walked out of the building, his face gloomy. In front of everyone, he finally turned to me, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You're suspended, go home and reflect." He paused, his voice even colder. "I warn you, Summer, stay away from Anne." I couldn't be bothered to entangle with them and turned to leave. After walking a few steps, my phone vibrated with an anonymous text. "The board meeting just ended. Charles proposed stripping your share inheritance rights on grounds of intentional injury, with most shareholders seconding. Moving fast." I returned to the Shin mansion, sensing something off as soon as I entered. I directly pushed open the master bedroom door, and a cloyingly sweet perfume scent hit me. It was Anne's. My room had been completely changed to pink lace and dolls, with intimate photos of her and Ethan on the bedside table. They were trying to erase all traces of my existence this way. "Bring the trash bags." I coldly ordered the servants. Lydia was sitting in the downstairs living room, holding a teacup, her face showing the smugness of a victor. When she saw me and the servants dragging bags downstairs, her face changed instantly. "Summer, what are you trying to do now?" I ignored her, walking straight to the center of the yard, having the servants dump everything on the lawn. Those expensive silks and photos piled into a small mountain. I pulled out a lighter, click, and the flame danced. "You dare!" Lydia screamed and rushed out. I casually tossed the lighter into the pile of clothes, and the flames whooshed up. "Lydia," I watched the flames, my voice not loud but clear. "There can only be one mistress here." She trembled with anger, suddenly rushing up and raising her hand for a slap. Slap. My cheek burned hotly, a rusty taste in my mouth. "I'll make Ethan divorce you. Leave you with nothing," she roared hysterically. I extended my tongue tip, licking the blood from the corner of my mouth, looking up coldly at her. "Want to see the video?" Her curses stopped abruptly, as if her neck was choked. "The complete video of your precious goddaughter stealing company secrets and falling down the stairs herself." I took out my phone and played the just imported video. The phone's light reflected on Lydia's deathly pale face. She stared fixedly at N's sneaky actions and the full process of falling in the video, her whole body stiff. She immediately trembled as she called Ethan. "Ethan, come back immediately, now." Ethan rushed home and saw the smoking ashes in the yard, his mother's pale face, and me with blood at the corner of my mouth. When he saw the video on my phone, his body gradually stiffened, the anger on his face fading into shock and disbelief. But he didn't apologize. He spoke, his voice hoarse. "Why did you set her up?" I almost laughed out loud. So in his eyes, revealing the truth was setting up. Set up? I met his gaze, stepping closer. "Ethan, do you think making her fall was my goal?" He frowned tightly, looking at me puzzled. "The real trap is that report." I stared at him, word by word. "The data in the report is fake. And gives it to her dad, and Sue Group will invest all funds based on wrong data, losing everything." The entire living room fell into dead silence. Lydia gasped, finally understanding the ruthlessness behind it. The color drained inch by inch from Ethan's face. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. The anger and disgust in his eyes disappeared, replaced by a complex emotion mixed with wariness and fear. After a long while, he squeezed out a few words through his teeth. "I'll handle it." I knew that from this moment, in his eyes, I was no longer the prisoner he could manipulate at will. And this was just the beginning. The farce of him being set up to fall down the stairs became a new chasm between Ethan and me. The wariness and defense in his eyes were the weapons I most enjoyed seeing. The next day, I walked into his office and placed a document in front of him. "New Bay project, I'm taking full charge." My tone was calm, leaving no room for discussion. "In 1 month, I'll solve all problems." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingertips lightly tapping the desk. His scrutinizing gaze was like evaluating a dangerous item. He suspected me, feared me, yet couldn't find a reason to refuse. "Fine." He finally spoke, the corners of his mouth pulling into a cold arc. "I'd like to see what medicine you're selling in your gourd." He agreed. But I knew that outside the office, the people he sent to monitor me were already following like shadows. The first thing I did was meet the government liaison for the New Bay project, Kevin. In the coffee shop, I didn't beat around the bush, directly pushing a marked environmental assessment report in front of him. "Kevin, this environmental assessment report has falsified data, especially the hexavalent chromium detection values being severely lowered. Once a third-party agency intervenes in re-verification, not only will the project halt immediately, but all approving officials will face dereliction of duty investigations." The smile on his face froze instantly. "Summer." He lowered his voice, leaning forward, his eyes full of warning. "Do you know what you're saying? If this blows up, Shin Group will face astronomical fines." "I know." I stirred the coffee in my cup. "That's why I'm here to see you." He understood my intention and tentatively asked, "What conditions do you want?" I laughed, shaking my head. "I want nothing." I pushed a more complete copy of the evidence chain to him. "I'm just here to remind Kevin that someone wants to drag you and the people behind you down together. These things, I won't touch for now." Watching the cold sweat bead on his forehead, I knew I had planted the most unstable bomb inside the enemy. On the other side, David indeed couldn't sit still. He took the initiative to meet me, assuming an elder's posture, using co-developing new projects as bait to probe my cards. I played along, feigning hesitation, then as if persuaded, sighed. "Uncle David, to be honest, this project is indeed a gold mine. I recently discovered a new business vein. If operated properly, profits can triple. But, the required capital is too large." "Oh? Tell me about it." A shrewd light flashed in his eyes. I described the opportunities from the fake report tailored for him, embellishing them. In the face of huge benefits, all his vigilance turned into desire. 3 days later, news came that Sue Group grandly announced an additional $2 billion strategic investment in the New Bay project. The fish took the bait. When Ethan learned of this, he was holding a board meeting. He smashed his cup on the spot, his bloodshot eyes glaring fixedly at me like an enraged beast. Summer. You're colluding with David. You want to join outsiders to swallow Shin Group. In front of all directors, he publicly accused me of betrayal. In his eyes, all this linked into ironclad proof of my betrayal. The boardroom buzzed with discussions, everyone looking at me with suspicion and disdain. I made no defense, just facing Ethan's murderous gaze, calmly standing up. Ethan, there's 1 week until the shareholders' meeting. Word by word, my voice clearly reached everyone's ears. At that time, you'll know the full truth. The meeting ended amid suspicion and chaos. I returned to the empty office, just sat down, and my phone screen lit up. It was an anonymous text. No extra words, just an address. An address etched in my bones and blood, unforgettable forever. It was the street where my brother Alan had the accident 3 years ago. The sender said he was the only eyewitness at the car accident scene that year. My heart contracted sharply, blood rushing to my head instantly. I grabbed the car keys, almost rushing out of the office, speeding toward that address immediately. That anonymous text made my blood rush to my head instantly. I rushed out of Shin Building, flooring the accelerator, speeding toward that address etched in my bones. Under the dim streetlights, I found the homeless man curled up under the bridge. He was the only eyewitness from 3 years ago, always hiding due to fear of the Shin family's power. I didn't waste words, directly placing 100,000 cash and a lawyer's agreement in front of him, guaranteeing his safety. He took it with trembling hands. In a cheap motel, he recorded the complete testimony on my phone. From Anne's drunk driving, to her panicked phone call, to Ethan arriving, holding and to comfort her, and handling the scene's traces, every detail matched my sealed memories perfectly. I secretly settled the witness, then returned to the Shin mansion, locking myself in the study. Using the back door I left when I was finance director, I pulled up all of Shin Group's financial data. Linking the clues I found earlier. Staggering assets, through complex shell companies, ultimately flowed to Sue. Technical patents, core clients, even Shin family's ancestral antiques, he was practically using Shin family's lifeblood to feed Sue family. I compiled all evidence into a booklet, totaling over 15 billion. The night before the shareholders' meeting, Charles met me, finally dropping his arrogance. 5 billion cash, in exchange for everything in your hands, and forfeit inheritance rights. He pushed a check in front of me. I laughed, pushing it back. Charles, is my brother's life worth only 5 billion in your eyes? What I want isn't money, it's justice. His patience exhausted, face ashen. Don't be shameless. I can make you have no peace in Cydia forever. On the day of the shareholders' meeting, the atmosphere in the conference room was heavy. Charles allied with several major shareholders to attack me. I propose, on grounds of Ms. Summers' misconduct and harming company interests, to strip all her inheritance rights. He said sternly. Ethan seconded expressionlessly. Shareholders whispered, their gazes toward me full of disdain. Just as they prepared to vote by show of hands, I stood up. Everyone, please stay calm. My voice instantly quieted the entire conference room. I walked to the projector, connected my computer. Before voting, I'd like everyone to see some things. The screen lit up, showing a clear asset transfer diagram. Arrows started from Shin Group, all ultimately pointing to Sue Group. This is part of the assets General Manager Ethan transferred to Sue Group over 3 years, totaling 15.2 billion. The venue erupted. Ignoring Ethan's instantly pale face, I flipped through the evidence page by page. Including 3 core technical patents that Shin relied on to start, authorized to Sue for $1. The group's most important 10 overseas major clients, transferred for free, even, the priceless autumn mountain painting of the old gentleman, balanced under office consumption, now hanging in David's study. This is normal business cooperation. Charles slammed the table and stood up. Is it? I sneered, pressing the last file. Thanks to the meeting minutes privately provided by Sue's sidelined vice president, I wonder how Charles will explain this. On the screen was Sue Group's meeting record. In black and white, their plan to hollow out Shen was written. This time, no one could sit still. The shareholders exploded completely, their interests severely infringed, angry questions rising one after another. The conference room descended into chaos. I stood amid the noise, quietly looking at Ethan in the main seat. He no longer had his previous composure, face ashen, his gaze toward me only holding incredulous defeat. The conference room was in utter chaos, those once lofty shareholders now full of panic and anger on their faces. Everyone thinks this is just hollowing out the company? I chuckled lightly, projecting another file on the screen. The real bomb is here. On the screen was the Nubay project's environmental assessment report. I marked the fatal data in red circle, hexavalent chromium severely exceeding. This land is toxic land. Once exposed, Shen will face government's astronomical fines and reputational collapse. I paused, my gaze glancing over Ethan, landing on and beside him whose face was also starting to pale. Right, just 3 days ago, Sue Group grandly announced an additional $2 billion strategic investment in this toxic land project. This meant Shen and Sue were tied together by me, hanging on the cliff's edge. I didn't know. I didn't know the land was toxic. Ethan finally reacted, roaring like a trapped beast. You didn't know? I laughed, my fingertip lightly tapping the keyboard. The screen immediately switched to an internal email. Sender, Ethan. The email content clearly stated, conceal geological issues, advance the project quickly, all responsibility borne by Summer. Ironclad evidence. He wanted to shift the blame, let me die without burial. Stop the project immediately. Hold Ethan accountable. The shareholders went mad, angry waves almost lifting the roof. Everyone quiet. Charles slammed the table fiercely, face ashen. He knew if he didn't control the situation, Shen family would capsize today. He stared fixedly at me, finally squeezing out a sentence through his teeth. I propose that Summer take full responsibility for the Nubay project's aftermath. He wanted to protect his endangered son this way. Fine. I agreed crisply, but I have conditions. I extended one finger. First, immediately dismiss Ethan from CEO position, with me acting as proxy. I extended a second finger. Second, recover all assets transferred by Ethan to Sue, not a penny less. I agree. A major shareholder raised his hand first. Agree. Approving voices rose one after another, passing my proposal with overwhelming votes. Ethan was stripped of all real power on the spot. He slumped in his chair, his handsome face twisted, his gaze toward me full of endless hatred. The meeting ended, I walked step by step to Ethan. Whispered in his ear, Ethan, this is just the beginning. Then, in front of Charles and Lydia, I took out my phone and connected it to the projector. Before handling company matters, let's settle personal accounts first. I pressed play. On the screen, a curled-up homeless figure appeared, trembling as he recounted that night's events. The conference room was deathly silent. Charles and Lydia's faces turned from ashen to deathly gray. Ethan trembled violently all over, his legs weakening, almost unable to stand. I looked at his defeated appearance, no ripples in my heart. 3 years ago, he used those knees to trade away my life. I put away the phone, dialing 911 in front of them. Hello, I want to report a crime. The true culprit in the hit-and-run case on South City Road 3 years ago is N. I have the complete evidence chain and have secured the key witness, ready to cooperate with the police anytime. The call ended, Lydia screamed and collapsed to the ground. Soon, the conference room door was pushed open, several uniformed police walked in. I looked indifferently at and shrinking in the corner, trembling with fear. The police walked to her, showing handcuffs. And, you're suspected of traffic accident crime and obstructing justice, please come with us. No, it wasn't me. Ethan, save me. Save me. And screamed in breakdown, clutching Ethan's clothes tightly. But Ethan just stood rigidly, like a soulless statue. The police's cold uniforms, like a basin of cold water, extinguished all the clamor in the conference room. No, it wasn't me. Ethan, save me. Save me. And screamed in breakdown, clutching Ethan's clothes tightly, as if grasping the last straw. Ethan finally snapped out of his rigidity. He subconsciously wanted to step forward, to protect him behind him, just as he had done countless times before. With just one step, I blocked him. Obstructing official duties adds to the crime. I looked at his bloodshot eyes, my voice calm without a ripple. Ethan, do you want to go in and accompany her? He was like struck by lightning, his steps nailed in place. Click. The cold handcuffs locked Anne's wrists. That crisp sound also completely locked away the last trace of color on Ethan's face. He could only watch helplessly as the woman he protected with my life was taken away by police like a stray dog. I formally took over Shin Group. The first thing was to announce the group rename in front of all executives. From today, this is called Summer Group. I watched the workers remove the 4 gilded characters Shin Group from the wall. In my heart, no satisfaction, only a dead silent desolation. Immediately after, I announced the second order. Establish a special task force, at all costs, recover all illegally transferred assets to Sue Group during Ethan's tenure. David, upon learning his daughter was arrested and the investment project he traded his life's work for was an unfillable toxic pit, had a heart attack on the spot and was sent to ICU. Sue Group's stock price overnight hit limit down, crashed, on the verge of bankruptcy. Charles knelt before me. In the same living room where I once knelt begging him to save my brother. This arrogant old man for life, tears streaming, begged me to spare Ethan. I looked down at him like a stranger. When my brother knelt begging you, where were you? One sentence blocked all his pleas in his throat. I mobilized all the group's resources and connections, soon finding the chief doctor who handled Alan's condition back then. He had retired, living in a remote small city. I didn't force him, just placed Alan's photo in front of him and quietly pressed the phone's record button. The doctor looked at the pale but still smiling boy in the photo, his turbid eyes reddened. He tremblingly told me. Mr. Ethan, he never paid the surgery fee. Not a cent. Our hospital advanced part, but the follow-up costs, we were waiting, Alan was waiting too, but he didn't wait. So, he was too lazy to even act the full deception on me. That $3 million was an empty promise from the start. I submitted this blood-stained testimony, along with the recording, to all media I could contact. Overnight, news of Shin Prince's betrayal, delaying treatment causing a young boy's death, swept the entire network like a virus. Ethan's social reputation completely collapsed. And the evidence I presented at the shareholders' meeting had already been given to the police. The $15.2 billion asset hollowing, and the New Bay project's commercial fraud, each a serious crime. In the face of overwhelming public opinion and the ironclad evidence I submitted, Ethan was formally arrested. Due to the huge amount involved and vile circumstances, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. 3 months later, the marriage agreement expired. Under the lawyer's witness, I and a man in prison uniform formally dissolved the marriage. I calmly signed my name. At the same time, I obtained 50% of Summer Group's shares, becoming the rightful largest shareholder. I used the first asset recovered from Sue to establish the Allen Foundation. Specifically to fund poor children with rare diseases like my brother. Alan, my brother, his name finally continued in a clean, warm way. 1 year later, I went to the prison. Across a thick layer of bulletproof glass, I saw Ethan. He wore prison uniform, hair shaved short, his once handsome face haggard, the light in his eyes long extinguished. We faced each other in silence. Until visitation time was almost over, he lifted his head, hoarsely asking me a question. Summer, have you ever truly loved me? I didn't answer. I just took out a well-preserved photo from my bag and pressed it against the glass. It was Alan's photo, lying on the hospital bed, smiling happily, tightly clutching a half-old Transformers toy. I looked at Ethan's instantly contracting pupils, speaking into the phone receiver word by word. When he passed, he was still clutching the transformers you gave him. He said, "Brother Ethan is a good person." I hung up the phone, slowly turning away in his collapsed, desperate gaze. Walking out of the cold visitation hall, the afternoon sunlight poured unreservedly on me, warm to the point of dazzling. I knew revenge was over. And my life had just begun.